Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Grimdark Breakdown. I wanted to do a quick video talking about the psychology of how you build a list. So, I think a big mistake a lot of new players make is they go, well, this is a 100-point unit. And so it needs to do X or it needs to get a value of Y. And at a surface level, that's not a bad thing. You'll hear me say a lot of the time when I'm trying to send my emulator that it's 115 points. And some Dominions or Battle Sisters, it's 50. I'm like, I got a 170-point package. If I can go kill a Rogel Dorn that's 240, like that's a win. What I'm trying to do is show you the concept of trading up. But that's what you need to learn from the beginning. Where you transition is understanding that Rogel Dorn to a Astra Militarum player is so much more valuable and critical to the way their army composition works than that immolator and those 4 Dominion that are going to come out, or 5 Dominion, right? The value difference, not just on a point perspective, but real intrinsic value to the way the army works is what you really want to think about. So what I did was, and this is applicable, by the way, to every single army. I just did this for Sisters as an easy example because I probably played 200 games with Sisters over the last couple of years, and so I know their units very intimately. I'm a big believer that units fall into only 3 categories. You're going to hear people talk about like, oh, well, they're good at this or they're good at this. Sure. Realistically, they are a utility piece, they are a utility plus, or they are a damage piece. And that is, when I look at a unit, that is all I look at. That is it. And I'm going to use super easy examples. In a different video, I will actually break this down for Sisters players, but for this one, I want to stay very generic. So if we're looking at a utility only piece, these units stereotypically are not going to do damage. I've got Sisters here with bolt guns. I've got close combat weapons. I've got, combi bolters and 3 attacks with a plasma pistol or a plasma sword, right? So it's nothing that's going to be scary. But each one of these units does something that can help my army from a utility perspective. Maybe it's infiltrating. Maybe they have some ability or stratagem that when you put together, make them really, really tough. Maybe that they are just meant to move fast and go score points. Maybe they are a command point farmer. Maybe they're just a transport, like a rhino that doesn't do any damage, but their goal is to just help move and protect units. They're pure utility units. And if they kill something, that is the icing on the cake, and it will happen once in a blue moon, but that's not what you're planning on them doing. You're planning on them solely just helping you play the game, score points, do things, move, block, whatever it is, right? So once you understand that that's what that unit's job is, you can rate its value accordingly. You might have a 70-point unit that does okay damage, but it's relatively tough. Like one, volley from a shooting unit isn't going to take it down. They're probably going to have to commit 2. Well, that unit may be great for you to throw out on the middle on turn 1, because you could go, I'm going to get this game started, and they have 2 choices. They can undercommit and hope they roll hot and kill this thing, or they got to bring 2 things out to kill it to keep me from scoring those primary. And now on my turn, I'm going to clap back and I'm going to attack those 2 things they brought out, right? So in that case, you may go, well, I just sent this 70-point unit out to die. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is I sent this 70-point unit out to bait out 300 points of their shooting that now I can tee off on that were previously hiding behind walls. Or 150 points of their melee has now come into the middle that I can now come out to tee off on, either in a counter charge or shooting or whatever. But the whole point is that unit was a lure in the water for you to get your opponent to come out and for you to get the game started on your terms, not on theirs. And so that's where you can start looking at it and go, oh, they didn't just die. They had a real value. These units, I think, are once you get to a more intermediate level, you'll understand them a lot better, because a lot of the time players just look at the stat line of like, how killy is this unit? And if you were to look at, like, as an example, a solo Canoness, you'd go, she's not very killy. And then you might go, well, I'm going to equip her so she can let the unit reroll once. Okay, sure. A 60-point unit to let a model range, like a unit get to reroll ones, that's not really worth it. But if I said, hey, I got a 60-point unit, I can go throw out there on a point. She's got a 2-up, 4-up, and once per game, I can give her a 2-up invulnerable save. That's spicy, right? Now, if they have to commit real shooting, I've had a Rogel Dorn do its full load. I had 2 ghost Neils that came out, unloaded on her, barely killed her. It took 2 of them to kill her in shooting. And then guess what? I spent 1 CP, which didn't cost anything because that's her second ability. And I resurrected her right onto the point. So in that case, her damage profile is blah. But when you look at everything she can do, you go, oh, okay, there's some value here. There's some real value here. Now, as we transition into the second category, these are what I like to call utility plus. And here's the thing. Some of you may be looking and going, oh my gosh, there's some real damage units in there. You know, you've got a 10-man Sacrosanct Brick. Like, that's 30 attacks with either sustained or lethal hits. Like, absolutely, not arguing. They can do good damage. But what I'm meaning is this unit's job is utility plus. And that plus may be damage, but that plus could also be something else. So, like Sanctifiers, they're utility plus. Here's what I mean by that. They can scout your transport, so it gets that additional movement. They have a ton of flamers, so now you have an Overwatch threat. They're not very expensive, so if you need them to go be a screen or go do a mission or go run out into the open to be a piece of bait, they can do that. If they're standing on a point, they have a chance to generate miracle dice, which is what your army needs, right? So that's what I say utility plus, because they can do multiple things for you. You know, if we were to look at like the novitiates, if they're by themselves, they're purely a utility plus, whether they're a 10-man or 2 5-mans, right? They're just infiltrating screens, point scorers, hold your expansion kind of thing. You put a Palatine with them, now they're utility plus because they can infiltrate that Palatine. They become a 10-body shield to protect her while she can go deliver mortal wounds and do some real damage. I mean, no joke, I've had a Palatine before do like 8 damage to a tank by herself. So now all of a sudden it does multiple things. And that's where each of these kind of comes in. So the Sacrosaints is an example. You know, they could do damage, but they also are very, very tough. Immolator could do damage, but it's also a transport. So understanding what they do and that they do multiple things kind of lets you know what that role is and how you're trying to fulfill that role. And then the last category is purely damage units. Now, here's the thing with these guys and gals. A lot of the time, a big misconception is if they're not killing, you're not getting your points. And this can absolutely be true. So if I'm just going to use an example of Morgan Vol, because everybody knows who Morgan Vol is. If she is standing back here the whole game, then I would completely agree with you. She is not earning any of her points and there's no value whatsoever, right? But I'm going to flip that. Let's just pretend that she's like right here, okay? Now, if you said that the opponent is not coming middle and is really staying away from my expansion objective, and she hasn't killed anything, and say it's turn 3 or turn 4, she's getting your value, because what people are doing is they're respecting the fact that she's going to move to out into this range, and now she's got 18-inch guns that she's shooting, and so what they're doing is they're afraid of the shooting and the charge threat that they could produce when they come out. And so it's keeping the opponent honest. It's kind of like anger on hiding behind a wall, or, you know, all of a sudden, you know, a big old, you know, Tau, you know, rail gun. Like, it doesn't have to always kill something to do its job and to score its points, because that fear projection that it puts out a lot of the time does what you need. Another really good example is, like, I like to put retributors in reserve. It's 8 multi-melt-a-guns. And the fact that they get to reroll ones to hit, reroll ones to wound, and I always bring them in to shoot something that's killed. So it's +1 to hit and +1 to wound. So think about this. When you tell your opponent, hey, when I bring them in, I'm going to have 8 multi-melta shots, hitting on threes, rerolling ones. And even against your biggest, toughest, scariest thing, I'm wounding on fours, re-rolling ones. And just so you know, I can use a miracle dice to just make it an auto 6 for that melta damage. All of a sudden, they're going to go, oh, they're going to have to start screening. They're going to have to prepare for that rapid ingress, because if they're a smart player, they're going to realize that, hey, you're going to bring them in. You're probably going to get like 6 hits, and then you're probably going to get 3 to 4 wounds. And then guess what? If they fail 2 of them, the first one is 6 damage straight off the cut. And so that's where it can really start to make a player go, ooh, I need to screen the sides of the board better. I need to prepare for that potential rapid ingress, because when they come in, or that reserve play, they're going to just start laying hate and start shooting into me, doing significant damage. So I wanted to do this because I think it's helpful when you're building your list to understand what is the job of this unit. Obviously, when you see your opponent, things can shift a little bit, but there's no world where you want a Morgan Ball, or you want a Rogel Dorn, or you want the Lion or Fulgrim, or any of these giant models. You don't want them doing area denial. So you need to make sure that you have things set up accordingly for how you want to do. I was talking to an EC player last night. Last thing an EC player wants to do is to have 2 demon princes having to cleanse, right? So understanding what your units are, where they're positioned, and how you're best going to use them is really, really critical for you to be able to understand how to win games. When you stop looking at it as everything's job is to be a hammer, then you actually will realize you have a full toolbox at your disposal. Because when everything's a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And the problem is that when that hammer misses, your entire game plan falls apart. But if you have an entire toolbox, you can build whatever you need, and you have a lot more versatility. I've won games, and I have no shame in saying, by straight up running away from my opponent, screening and running, screening and running. And it was a tight, gritty game, but I was able to win because I realized I could swing the hammer all day long. The guy had 3 Lancers, Canis Rex, and an Atropos. I was not killing 5 big knights. Was not going to happen no matter what I did. So instead, I had to play a different kind of cagey game. But if I had just approached it from deathmatch, I'd have killed 2 knights and I'd have been tabled and lost the game. That's where you have to be able to adjust and pivot. Hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully this gives you some insight. I'm happy if you ever jump in the Discord to walk through any of your armies and help you break down your units into kind of these 3 categories so that you know, and help with list construction. Drop a like for the Emperor, subscribe for more content. We'll see you guys in the next one.